Few players have put together a more illustrious career in the Pacific Northwest than Tyler Lockett. Does he have an 11th season with the Seahawks in store? We're going to be discussing the possibility that number 16 may still have a chance to return in 2025 as we get ready for our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, the host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined here on our Wednesday episode by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there that is tuning in, whether you're in Lower Queen or listening from Bozeman, Montana in Yellowstone country. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you. We're getting closer to the start of free agency. Going to continue diving into some of Seattle's own free agents and some players from other teams at the tight end position that may be on the radar to add to Clint Kubiak's offense. It's going to be a jam-packed episode, so let's get to it. Now for your lead story here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Tyler Lockett has left a major imprint on the Seahawks record books since he was drafted in the third round in the 2015 NFL draft out of Kansas State. He is in the top 3 in receptions, receiving touchdowns, receiving yardage. He is on the cusp of setting some more franchise marks in 2025. Of course, that's if he is back in 2025. And Rob, this may be the most important storyline right now for Seahawk fans, for many Seahawk fans, because of the player that we are talking about here. And this is not going to be the first time that John Schneider has had to make a difficult decision on a franchise icon. We saw the Seahawks release Richard Sherman in the past. We saw him release Bobby Wagner, trade Russell Wilson. This is not a new phenomenon, and John Schneider has not let sentimental things impact his business. He has tried to put together the best roster he can, and certainly these choices are always tough, but with a cap hit north of $30 million, we can guarantee that Tyler Lockett will not be with the Seahawks on his current contract as it is structured. But I do wonder, especially with the news coming out today, that the salary cap is expected to be between $277.5 million and $281.5 million, more than $20 million increase from last year. I'm wondering if that maybe opens the door a little bit wider for these two sides to be able to strike a new restructure deal or some type of an extension that's going to move some of that money down the road so that he can continue and maybe finish his career in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, a lot of what you said there, Corbin, I 100% agree with. As far as just who Tyler Lockett is as a player, as a person on and off the field, he's just so universally respected. And then the fact that the salary cap number is higher than at least some we're anticipating, I think that just makes it that much more likely that Seattle is able to come to some type of a solution, be able to create an extension for Tyler Lockett. Or I do think that there is a possibility that the Seahawks just recognize the fact that, hey, we want you to play one more year in Clint Kubiak's system. And while that $30 million cap hit is, cost prohibitive and just makes you, really kind of scratch your head as far as who are and why are you prioritizing what you're prioritizing with this roster. At the same time, I don't think that it's 100% given that Tyler Lockett isn't back at 2025 at his current salary and with the current deal. I do think that it makes more sense for Seattle to extend him and try to kick the can down the road. I also think you can make a very, very strong argument for essentially just releasing him outright. And as you mentioned, John Schneider has made those type of very difficult decisions before. And there's no question that Tyler Lockett wasn't used as well in this last, in 2024 by the Seahawks offensive play callers and coaches as perhaps his skill set, warrants. But at the same time, it is an eroding skill set. There's no denying that. You look back at the numbers, and sometimes I think statistics can be bent an awful lot of ways. But anybody who watched the way that the Seahawks played and the way that Tyler Lockett has played over the last couple of years, then I think that they would see that he very rarely created yards after contact, after the catch, and then certainly after contact. In fact, last year he only had 30 total yards after contact, at least according to Pro Football Focus. 30 total yards. You know, I mean, that's just ridiculous numbers. There's often a lot of receivers who I think could be available via free agency or the draft. You might get 30 yards after contact and on just one reception, of course. And so, again, just knowing the way that Clint Kubiak's offense is completely built around getting the ball to wide receivers in space, then being able to create, I still think that the most likely scenario, and it is heartbreaking to say it, but I think the most likely scenario is that Tyler Lockett has played his final game in Seattle. I think that's the decision the Seahawks have to go with. It's kind of the Patriot way, but I think it's before the Patriot way, it was the John Schneider and Seahawks way, and lots of other clubs as well. I do see a scenario in which Tyler Lockett's back. I'd love to see him come back, but I think that the smart way, if you want to build a championship caliber team, is you cannot be allocating this amount of money to a player that is very clearly past his prime.
Yeah, I'm going to put it at 0% that Tyler Lockett is on this roster with his current contract. That has not changed for me. At this current value, $30+ million cap hit for a number 3 receiver, it would make absolutely no sense. It would be salary cap malpractice, even though we're talking about one of the most iconic receivers in franchise history and one that I still think has plenty to offer an NFL team. I don't think he was maximized last season, but the numbers are the numbers. And last year, 49 receptions, the lowest he had since his second year in the league. 600 receiving yards, the second fewest in his career. 2 touchdown catches. There were so many games where I had to look on the sideline and see if number 16 was even in uniform because he just wasn't part of the offense. They weren't maximizing him at all. And when you watch the film, you can see him getting open, and there were times the ball just didn't get to him. And there were times where receivers were jumbled together, and it took him out of the game, especially in the red zone. So I think you can look at the offense as part of that. And that's why at this juncture, look, a couple weeks ago, if you would have asked me this, we talked about it in the show, I would have said it's a 95% chance that number 16 is not playing another game for the Seattle Seahawks. I'm going to put that number at 75% right now. And the reason that I think that there's now more of a sliver of hope here, there's 2 reasons. With that salary cap bump, it's not a huge bump compared to expectations, but still, it gives you a little bit more flexibility to maybe be able to handle, say, a $13-14 million cap hit instead of asking him to do $8 or $9 million, which would be really difficult for a player of his stature to stomach. And I think it'd be difficult salary cap wise to be able to create a contract that's going to be able to do that. Maybe they add a void year to the end of this contract, or they extend him for a year and add a void year, or just try to push some of those salary cap values out. But I think John Schneider is going to be trying to work, if he's not already doing this, I think he's going to be working behind the scenes with his front office members, and they're going to be trying to come up with a plan for how they can approach Tyler Lockett, who, if you've watched on social media, like, I'm sorry, the guy has been reminiscing about the 12-minute video they posted of him running routes. You can't tell me he doesn't want to finish his career in Seattle. And I think the Seahawks would love to do that, especially with this offense that has been pretty good for receivers in the past with Clint Kubiak. I think it'd be a really solid fit for him. I'm wondering if they'd be more willing to do that $13-14 million cap hit. It'd be a major difference from what we are scheduled to see right now with that $30+ million cap hit. And there are different ways they can do that. They've got a lot of cap space for the next 2 years. You can push some of that money and then make the decision next year if they believe that he could be a good fit in this offense. And that's really the big $1 million question here. I think you have to set up a redone deal, though. You have to get close to the $17 million that you would get by cutting him. That would be, to me, the prerequisite qualification. You have got to be able to restructure it where you're saving $15, $16, $17 million against the cap this year. If you're not able to do that, then I think you have to move on at that point. If they can come up with a new deal that is going to do that and keep both sides happy, then I'm all for it. Because look, Tyler Lockett's like the old man at the YMCA that catches you off guard and nails threes and makes behind-the-back passes and does things you're like, I wasn't expecting that. Tyler Lockett's going to be the guy in his mid-30s that he might have lost a few steps, but he's still going to get open. He's still a really good route runner, and he's just so darn football smart. He is that guy that's going to continue to play well. You just got to have the offense cater to it. So I do think there is more of a chance now that this happens than, say, a couple weeks ago. I'm feeling like there might be a chance, but I'm still leaning towards this is probably the last we've seen of number 16.
Well, and to your point about the fact that Tyler Lockett so consistently is able to get open, especially on money downs. I mean, as you noted, he had 50 receptions a season ago. Well, 36 of those went for first downs. So again, on money downs, when Geno Smith had some time, then Tyler Lockett was consistently open. And so I think that you can make a strong argument that he can be very successful in Clint Kubiak's offense. And of course, if it is in fact Geno Smith at the quarterback position, which we've been led to believe, if DK Metcalf returns, Jackson Smith and Jigba, of course, you're going to assume that there is going to be just some, added maturity. He's going to add that much more production to his game. Very clearly, Tyler Lockett would be the number 3 receiver, but that is still as excellent a pass receiving, core for the Seahawks and for a team that is looking to win now. So again, you can make a strong argument for Tyler Lockett being back. The erosion of the skill set to me is a huge concern here. The fact that he is 32 going on feels like 42, as you said with that Y reference. But again, the savviness is what, and the savviness and just the loyalty, the human being that he is. That's why you do want to extend him or create a void. You think that's a great idea. Anything to try and bring him back other than having to absorb just an incredibly cost prohibitive cap number. And that's the thing is that I'm sure that John Schneider and his staff have been looking at this for awful long time. And Tyler Lockett and whatever representatives that he might have assisting him at this point. But I do know that the Tyler Lockett's deal is going to have to get figured out here shortly. Obviously, we have free agency coming up, but he's due a $5.3 million bonus on March 16th. I mean, so that's less than a month away. So whatever is going to happen, we're not going to have to wait until the beginning of the training camp or mini camp to know what's going to happen with Tyler Lockett. We're going to know here a month before the draft.
Yeah, this is a move that I would expect if they're going to be moving on from him, or if they're going to be doing a restructured deal or a redone deal of some sort. I would think that they would want to get that done as soon as possible. When they get the combine coming up next week, that could be when something comes to fruition behind the scenes with John Schneider and company in Indianapolis. When we come back, we're going to continue looking at Seattle's own free agents set to hit the market, heading back to the defensive line with big Johnathan Hankins. Will he be back to play for Aden Durde for another season? We'll be breaking it down coming up next year on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching you with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives you taxes and gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All you have to do is do this to get the most money back, guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Welcome back to the Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Make sure for your second listen to check out the Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We're hitting closer and closer to the start of free agency. And as we just mentioned, John Schneider is going to have some interesting decisions that he needs to make here in coming weeks leading up to free agency. Once the start of the league year gets here and Seattle starts to try to sign their own free agents, as we've discussed, Rob, I don't know that there's very many players on this 10-player list that the Seahawks are going to be rushing to re-sign. And there are several players like Laken Tomlinson that we discussed yesterday who may be back, but if he is going to re-sign, you'd expect that it's going to be late in the process, maybe even April like last year. Johnathan Hankins, the big veteran nose tackle, may be another player that fits that bill. And last year he was brought in with Adden Durde, formerly of the Dallas Cowboys. He coached Hankins for several years in Dallas. Hankins had a very interesting first season in Seattle from the perspective that there were games where it really seemed like he was a difference maker, and he created a lot of problems against the run. He was eating up double teams. He was making some plays in the backfield. He did have 5 tackles for loss this year. The problem was it felt like it was a yo-yo week to week. It was not inconsistencies within a game. It was week to week. There were games where Big 97, you could see him getting out of position, getting pushed around some, missing tackles, and he didn't provide as much pass rushing contributions as he has in the past. Even though he's a big nose tackle, he's had a couple seasons where he's had 3+ sacks. Even a year he had 7. He had 1 last year, and he was really a non-factor most of the season on pass rushing situations. And at this stage of his career, you can expect that. But I think that's where you really have, I don't want to say it's a dilemma, but you have a situation where Adden Durde may say, hey, this is a veteran nose tackle that I feel is a really good fit for this defense. But you also have to look at the fact that he is now well into his 30s. He's played a lot of games. He's a big guy. Is he going to be somebody that you can justify bringing back for anything more than veteran minimum? That's going to be the question the Seahawks have to ask, especially with this draft class that's coming in.
Yeah, exactly. The draft class coming up, I think, is a significant part of this. At the same time, unless Cameron Young suddenly, reacquaints himself with the Seahawks, then I don't think the Seattle has a true nose guard necessarily to replace Johnathan Hankins. So I do think that there is a good possibility that he may be back as good of a defensive line class as this is, to your point before about his fit with Adden Durde's defense and just how, pretty damn solid of a season, frankly, that Johnathan Hankins had. I mean, he wound up with 30 tackles, and that is, a pretty darn good number for a big nose guard who, is only on the field, of course, about half of the time. Those 5 tackles for loss were the most that he has had since 2019. He, of course, had the interception in the big win against the 49ers. He played all 17 games, which is something that he hasn't done in the last 4 years before that. So I kudos to Adden Durde for vouching for Hankins in the first place, and of course for the Seahawks for signing him, and to Hankins for just being a consistent, I guess not consistent, because to your point, there was definitely some ups and downs in his play. At the same time, I do think that for the 1 year, $2,050,000 deal that he signed, I thought that he was a pretty darn good bargain for the Seahawks. And to me, he is kind of like a Lakeland Tomlinson. Look, I think that you can do better in free agency and in the draft, but it's probably going to cost an awful lot more money. I think that just like what you talked about before with Tomlinson, as far as maybe after the draft, he is a veteran that you say, okay, we do have a spot for you coming on back, but he is a player because of the fact that he has such a great fit already with Durde, and the fact that Seattle's defensive line last year, towards the end of the year, really seemed like they were starting to, really have some just inspired play and really fit in with each other. Obviously, the ascent of Byron Murphy is going to be critical. If Big Johnathan Hankins has any type of leadership, or connection with Byron Murphy, I think that I hate to say it in a financial setting, but I think that absolutely has some value to the Seahawks. And that's something that I know that John Schneider, Adden Durde, certainly Mike McDonald are going to be paying closer attention to, rather than just the lack of statistics that some of the other nose guards around the NFL might command.
Traditionally, John Schneider has leaned when he's had a situation where he's had an aging veteran and he has to consider re-signing a player that's more of a role player. He's typically gone for youth. And with this being a really good defensive line class, he may very well still go that route with replacing Johnathan Hankins. However, if there has been a position where John Schneider has consistently had success signing players in their early to mid 30s, even late 30s, it has been defensive tackle. Just consider some of the players. Atuba Rubin, early 30s, played some really good football for the Seahawks. Tony McDaniel was brought back for a second stint in his mid-30s and played well for the Seahawks. Kevin Williams, at the end of his career, helped the Seahawks get back to the Super Bowl, had a really good season. Al Woods was 36 the last time he was playing for the Seahawks and had a pretty good season. So this has been a position that has aged really well, even with bigger guys. And that building connection that Adendurde already has with Hankins, the trust that he has, and the fact that this is a guy that is beloved in the locker room. Everybody that I've talked to that has been on this Seahawks team or has been with Hankins with another team previously just raves about this guy. And I loved interviewing him last year. I just think he's a really fun guy who loves the game. He's passionate about it, and he's got leadership intangibles. So I just rattled off a lot of reasons why, if you can get him back on a similar deal, you look at what Spot Track is projecting right now, just a little bit more than this past season, 1 year, $2.8 million. I think if you can get it in that 2.3, 2.4 range, I think it makes a lot of sense. Even if you are drafting a nose tackle, we've seen this in Seattle even. When you throw a rookie into the mix at nose tackle, that actually could be a spot where it's kind of tricky for a big nose tackle to come in and really make an immediate impact. So I'm wondering if this could be a case where you keep him around as long as the price is right because of that trust factor, and allow a younger player. And maybe it's still Cameron Young, who just had a knee injury that bugged him all last year. Maybe they still think Cameron Young can be that guy. But if you're looking for a true big-bodied nose, I think you can draft one, and he could still potentially bring back Hankins. I actually am more confident Johnathan Hankins is on this roster than Laken Tomlinson next season, even with the fact there's more depth in that defensive line. As Daniel Jeremiah said the other day, you got to be greedy with defensive linemen. You think you have too many? You never have too many. And I think it makes sense to bring him back as long as he's not going to be commanding more money than he got last year.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's the thing, is that I do think that if you get a deal that's in that $2 to $3 million range, I think that's palatable, just considering the fact that, again, he was as durable as he was. And that's I keep mentioning the durability because that's the one reason why I am concerned about this, why I do think that Hankins is probably a guy that you want to bring back maybe post-draft. And if you lose him, then, again, I think that's where you have to evaluate how important is that leadership factor. But there are so many players in this draft class, Corbin, as you and I have kind of gushed about already, that would seemingly be perfect fits in the middle. And, of course, they're going to be so much younger. And you'd be able to build the kind of foundation. Obviously, a lot of teams like to build right up the middle. Then this is giving you your opportunity to do that 2 years in a row with Murphy, of course, the first pick last year, and then this class being as good as it is right down the middle.
When we come back, we're going to continue our free agent discussion on the offensive side of the ball. Yesterday, we looked at some receivers the Seahawks may have interest in. It's time to look at the tight end spot, which could be dramatically different looking for the Seahawks in Clint Kubiak's offense. We'll get to some tight ends that the Seahawks could target coming up next year on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or the first quarter, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally in the fourth quarter or picking a player such as Jimmy Butler to hit a clutch 3 for the Golden State Warriors. I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to the Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in, and thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Seahawks are going into the offseason with significant questions at a number of offensive position groups, and one that may change a lot compared to last year that has kind of been hovering under the radar a little bit has to be the tight end position. If you look at the 2024 season, Rob, Noah Fant only 1 touchdown catch. He looked like he was going to go a second full season without a touchdown, and then he caught one in the season finale. You did see an uptick in receptions and receiving yards compared to the season prior, but for a player that you gave a 2-year, $21 million contract, the numbers were very much underwhelming, and he seemed to take a step back in the blocking aspect as well. On the flip side, you had a rookie in A.J. Barner, a fourth-round pick out of Michigan that came in and finished second among tight ends in the rookie class with 4 touchdown receptions and really became a reliable pass catcher for Geno Smith in Ryan Grubb's offense last year. And seems like the type of player that would be a good fit in what Clint Kubiak wants to do. It is an interesting situation because Noah Fant, if you move on from him, you can save $8.9 million. That is a big chunk of change. And for a player that has not produced the numbers that you expected, that would make sense. At the same time, this has been a very tight end friendly offense that Clint Kubiak has ran both in Minnesota and last year in New Orleans. And so maybe he looks at Noah Fant and says, I can get those numbers out of him in my offense, and I've got a proven track record of doing it in the NFL. Unlike Ryan Grubb. That may very well be the case, but you're also facing the potential that Fant and Pharaoh Brown, who's a free agent, did not play very well at all in his lone season in Seattle. I don't know that he's going to be back either. I'd be very surprised if he returns. But you're looking at the possibility that A.J. Barner is the only one of the top 3 tight ends that's back. And I think you have to look at this free agent class, particularly one player that Clint Kubiak is very familiar with that's going to be available that could be really good replacements for Noah Fant.
Yeah, and that would be Juwan Johnson. And he is a player that, look, I'll be honest. I think that Noah Fant is a better player. I think he's a better fit in Clint Kubiak's offense. But obviously, Juwan Johnson, the fact that he has been a player in Clint Kubiak's offense already, is coming off of a very good season this past year. In which he caught 50 passes. This past season, he set career highs with 68 targets. 50 catches, 548 yards, and 27 first downs. He only caught 3 touchdowns, and that's far less than the 7 that he caught a couple of years back for New Orleans. This is a former wide receiver who's got a lot of the speed, the agility, the soft hands, the body control that make Noah Fant such a great target. Now, you kind of teed me up there to kind of talk about Juwan Johnson. And again, one of the reasons why I think that he would make some sense if the Seahawks were to move on from Noah Fant is just because of the familiarity with the offense. The physical traits are very similar. He's 6'4", he's 230 pounds. But at the same time, I would actually argue that you keep Noah Fant at his current salary or that you try to extend him. Now, as you said, his statistics were not very impressive. There's no denying that. 500 receiving yards that he had last year, which was an uptick, the most he's had in Seattle. That was 20th among NFL tight ends. But as you mentioned before, I do think that Noah Fant is a terrific fit in Clint Kubiak's offense. This is an offense that absolutely caters to players who have run after the catch ability. Noah Fant has that. I argued just a moment ago that Tyler Lockett, unfortunately, no longer has that. So again, I think that keeping Noah Fant around because of his size. He's a bigger guy, a slightly bigger guy than Juwan Johnson. He's a better blocker at the point of attack. I think that is the way that they should go, and I would even try to extend him. But at the same time, if they don't, then again, I think that Juwan Johnson would make some sense as being a possible replacement. I'm going to quickly switch to another tight end that I think would make some sense as far as a possible replacement for Pharaoh Brown, more of the blocking role. And that would be Durham Smythe, 6'6", 246 pounds. It's another player. He's right there at that 28, 29-year-old kind of threshold. Has been very, very durable over his career. I mean, Corbin, this guy's got 3 touchdown receptions to his name. Juwan Johnson, on the other hand, I believe has, 18. Okay, so again, one guy is the big play specialist. The other guy is very much the kind of blue-collar blocker at the line of scrimmage, a traditional wide tight end. And finally, just to wrap up my third guy, Harrison Bryant, 6'5", 230 pounds. Look, he was a very productive tight end for the Cleveland Browns, winds up signing with the Las Vegas Raiders as a free agent, and then, bam, Brock Bowers lands in the Raiders' lap, and Harrison Bryant basically never sees the field. He's a talented tight end, and you can get for basically pennies on the dollar for his talent, especially considering this is a really good draft class as well. So I think that John Schneider is one of the NFL's best as far as finding guys who are good values late in the free agent process. Harrison Bryant, to me, would be another kind of a consolation prize, is a little bit of a Jacob Hollister type of a type for Seahawks fans out there of how he could fit in Clint Kubiak's offense.
Yeah, I looked at this tight end group, and I think that it's kind of a under the radar free agent group. I think there's some really good talent in this class. And you've got some guys that are into their 30s now that are still pretty good players. And the first one that I'm going to throw out there, Austin Hooper, who went to the New England Patriots last year. And look, Hooper was a big money free agent signing for the Cleveland Browns a few years back, and it didn't work out for him. It didn't work out for the Browns. That happens a lot. Hooper goes to New England and ends up having a decent season. It was not great by any means, but look at New England's quarterback situation and the offense they had. I still look at Austin Hooper. He was, by the way, he was a top 10 graded run blocker at the tight end position. That is an area he has improved a lot since he came in the NFL out of Stanford. He was viewed more as a basketball player on the outside. He has really worked on his craft as a blocker over the years, and now he's a grizzled veteran that not a guy you're going to play a ton in line, but you can move him around as an H-back. You can do a lot of things with him. He's going to give you good effort as a blocker, and he's got a long track record of being a consistent, reliable receiver that can win sometimes down the seam. He can create at times after the catch. One other player that's going to offer some similarities to Juwan Johnson, and look, I'm throwing this name out. This one, I'm going to admit, there's a little bias here because when Mo Alley-Cox played basketball at VCU and they got into the NCAA tournament, this guy was like Charles Barkley to me. Like the way that he went up and skied up to get rebounds, he was an absolute monster. So when he said he was going to try to play in the NFL, I thought this guy is going to be a stud tight end. He has had his moments, but Indianapolis, it feels like there's games they use him and then there's games where he just kind of disappears. And he's 31. He's not a young guy necessarily. He's kind of an older rookie when he came into the league, though. And he had to learn how to play in the NFL. Mo Alley-Cox is a bigger version of Juwan Johnson that is going to block his tail off. He's got that physicality from playing basketball when he used to bully people, boxing them out. He is a guy that I've always looked at as a player that would fit the Seahawks, and I think he'd be a good fit in Kubiak's scheme because he can catch the football. He can win downfield with that basketball athleticism. He can sky up and get the ball. He hasn't had great quarterback play for much of the time he's been in Indianapolis. I think Geno Smith would like to throw to him. To me, he's a Pharaoh Brown type blocker that's going to give you much more upside in the passing game. And one last name I'm going to throw out there from the NFC West. He didn't start his career with the Rams, but Hunter Long, who made some plays against the Seahawks in the two games they played this season. Hunter Long does not have gaudy numbers as a pass catcher. In college at Boston College, he was a pretty reliable target. But I'm looking at him more in the same vein that you're looking at Durham Smythe. He's a player that really can get down and dirty. Coming from Boston College, he is a physical player. He's tough. He likes to block. There is a little bit more movability to his game than Durham Smythe. I think there's some untapped pass catching potential. Again, he could do it in college. There's been a few injuries in the NFL when he was with Miami and the Rams, but I look at him as a player. The Rams already have a couple of solid tight ends. They've got some cap issues that they're working through. I think there's a good chance you could get Hunter Long for a one-year deal that doesn't have a lot of guaranteed money, but he could come in and you put him with A.J. Barner. That could suddenly be a good young tight end duo to build in Clint Kubiak's offense. So I think there's a lot of options that make sense if Seattle decides to go a different direction, or even if they keep Noah Fant. A few of these names I mentioned would make sense adding to the stable of tight ends.
Oh, no question about it. Again, this is a pretty solid free agent class of tight ends. I think some guys that can certainly fill the specialist role as a blocker if necessary. And then if they need a true starting tight end, because look, I'm very intrigued by AJ Barner as well. I don't see the great lateral agility, acceleration that I want as far as being a true seam threat. I think he can be solid. But I would expect if the Seahawks do decide to move past Noah Fant, then that they would, have to allocate either big dollars or definitely go more the draft route. And then there are some spectacular players in this draft class. And I don't expect that Penn State's Tyler Warren is going to somehow fall down to Seattle 18 or that John Schneider is going to package picks up to get him. But I think there might wind up being more tight ends selected than wide receivers in the first and second rounds. And that does not happen very often. But this is, again, a very talented tight end class, got a lot of high-end talent. And the fact that A.J. Barner was such a hit for the Seahawks, I think that John Schneider and the Seahawks coaching staff have to be feeling pretty confident about their ability to be able to pluck a tight end, insert them into their system, and be able to have some fairly immediate success.
As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Reg. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. A quick reminder that tomorrow, our new website that we've started, Emerald City Spectrum, covering all major pro and college Seattle sports. We're having our hard launch tomorrow. Make sure to check out the website, emeraldcityspectrum.com, and subscribe. You can do either a monthly subscription at $6 or you can get an entire year at a discount for $60. Make sure to check that out. We're going to have great content for the Seahawks, Mariners, Sounders, Kraken, you name it. College, pro sports, we're going to have you covered. Emerald City Spectrum, make sure to check it out. We'll be back tomorrow with our Thursday episode. Going to start taking a detour previewing the upcoming NFL Combine. Make sure that you listen in and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday night. Go Hawks.